Mr. Kapoor adjusted his spectacles. The sun glanced off the dusty schoolyard, children in crisp uniforms, a sea of white and blue. Another day at St. Xavier's. He scanned faces, attendance on his mind. Then a flicker, a memory, vivid yet hazy, a dream. It had been a beautiful dream. A woman, her face obscured, draped in a crimson sari. They were dancing, a slow waltz under a chandeliered ceiling. He could almost feel her hand in his, smell the jasmine in her hair. He shook his head, the school bell jarring him back to reality. That night, the dream returned, more vivid than ever before. The woman was clearer now, her features etched in his mind like a delicate painting. Almond eyes, a delicate nose, and a laugh like tinkling bells that resonated in his soul. They were sharing chai, her bangles clinking softly, creating a melody that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. He felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity, a connection that transcended the dream, as if they had known each other for lifetimes. The crimson of her sari blazed like a beacon in his mind, a vibrant red that seemed to hold the essence of their bond. He woke up with a gasp, the scent of jasmine lingering in his senses, as if the dream had followed him into reality. What was the meaning of these dreams? Was it a premonition, a glimpse into a past life, or just his subconscious playing tricks? The questions swirled in his mind, leaving him in a state of confusion. Mr. Kapoor went about his day in a daze, the vivid images of the dream haunting his every step. The classroom felt different, the familiar faces of his students blurry and distant, as if he was seeing them through a fog. He couldn't concentrate on Shakespeare, the words blurring into meaningless lines, his mind drifting back to the dream. He was lost in a sea of crimson and jasmine, the woman's laughter echoing in his ears, a haunting melody that refused to fade. Days turned into weeks, the dream a recurring visitor. Each night, the woman became clearer, her voice, her touch, more real. He dreamt of her in his classroom, in the local market, even at the pan stall near his apartment. He found himself searching for her face in the crowd, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Was she someone he knew? A long-forgotten acquaintance? The intensity of the dream, the emotions it evoked, scared and confused him. He couldn't confide in anyone, not even his old friend, the mathematics teacher, Mr. Sharma. What would he say? That Mr. Kapoor, a man of logic and reason, was losing his mind over a figment of his imagination. One afternoon, during a particularly engaging session on Romeo and Juliet, he noticed her. It was a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, as if time itself had paused to take a breath. She was sitting in the front row, her head bent over her textbook, a strand of hair escaping her dupatta. Her concentration was intense, her eyes scanning the pages with a fervor that spoke of a deep love for learning. The sunlight filtering through the window painted a halo around her. It was as if the universe itself was highlighting her presence, making her stand out in a room full of students. It was her, the woman from his dreams. His breath hitched. He had seen her countless times in his sleep, always just out of reach, always a mystery. He knew those eyes, that shy smile. They were etched into his memory, a part of his subconscious that he could never quite shake off. She looked up, her gaze meeting his, and a jolt ran through him. It was as if an electric current had passed between them, a connection that was both thrilling and terrifying. He quickly averted his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. How was this possible? How could the woman who haunted his dreams be sitting right in front of him, in his classroom? The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He felt dizzy, his mind racing to make sense of this impossible coincidence. The woman who haunted his dreams, the woman who occupied his every waking thought, was his student. A girl he saw every day, whose presence he had taken for granted until this very moment. A girl he saw every day, whose essays he graded, whose future he helped shape. The weight of this recognition settled heavily on his shoulders, a burden he was not sure he could bear. Section 5. The Unveiling, his student. The words echoed in his mind, each syllable a hammer blow. He felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. This was wrong, so very wrong. He had to be misinterpreting things, overreacting to a silly dream. But deep down, he knew. He recognized the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating. A habit he'd found endearing in his dream, and now found unnerving in reality. He stumbled through the rest of the class, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and shame. He felt like a fraud, a hypocrite. How could he, a man entrusted with shaping young minds, be plagued by such thoughts about a student? Section 6. The Chasm of Understanding. Sleep offered no respite. The dream continued, but now it was tinged with guilt and a strange sense of foreboding. The chasm between his reality and the world of his dreams had never felt wider. He withdrew from his colleagues, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a brooding silence. Mr. Sharma noticed, of course. They were friends, had been since their college days. One evening, over chai and samosas, he confronted Mr. Kapoor. "What is it, Yar?" Mr. Sharma asked, his voice full of concern. "You've been distant lately." Mr. Kapoor hesitated, unsure how to articulate the turmoil within him. How could he confess his secret shame, the inappropriate nature of his dreams, to his friend? Section 7. Navigating the Maze. "It's nothing," Mr. Kapoor mumbled, staring into his teacup. He couldn't bring himself to speak the words aloud, to give voice to the thoughts that haunted him. He felt trapped, caught in a web of his own making. Mr. Sharma, however, was not easily dissuaded. He knew his friend too well. He pressed, his voice gentle but firm, until Mr. Kapoor, unable to bear the weight of his secret any longer, broke down. He told Mr. Sharma everything, the dreams, the woman, the crushing realization of her identity. He spoke in a rush, the words tumbling out in a torrent of shame and confusion. He expected judgment, disgust even, but Mr. Sharma. Section 8. Seeking Counsel. Mr. Sharma listened patiently, his expression grave but understanding. When Mr. Kapoor finished, there was a long silence. Mr. Kapoor braced himself for the inevitable condemnation, but it never came. "It's all right, my friend," Mr. Sharma finally said, his voice soft. "Dreams are strange things. They don't always make sense." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But you must remember, she is your student. There is a line that cannot be crossed." Mr. Kapoor nodded, his heart heavy. He knew Mr. Sharma was right. He had to find a way to separate the dream from reality, to reconcile his feelings with his responsibilities. He had to protect his student, and himself, from the dangerous path his mind seemed intent on taking. Section 9. Resolution and Acceptance. This chapter delves into the profound journey of coming to terms with one's past and embracing the future with a renewed sense of purpose. He took a leave of absence from school, seeking solace in the familiar rituals of his life. He visited his parents, hoping to find comfort in their presence and the warmth of his childhood home. He spent hours at the temple, immersing himself in the tranquility and seeking answers to the questions that plagued his mind. He sought guidance from the family priest, whose wisdom and experience provided a beacon of light in his darkest moments. Slowly, with time and introspection, the vividness of the dreams began to fade. The haunting images that once dominated his nights started to lose their grip on his psyche. He returned to St. Xavier's a changed man. The corridors that once felt like a maze of confusion now seemed like pathways to new beginnings. He was still Mr. Kapoor, the English teacher, but his approach to teaching had transformed. There was a new awareness in his eyes, a quiet strength that spoke of battles fought and lessons learned. He treated all his students with the same respect and care, understanding that each one had their own struggles and stories. But there was a newfound distance, a professionalism he hadn't felt before. It was as if he had built an invisible barrier to protect himself from the emotional turmoil of the past. This professionalism allowed him to focus on his work with a clarity and dedication that was previously elusive. He never forgot the woman from his dreams, her presence a constant reminder of the fragility of human connections. But he learned to compartmentalize, to separate the fantasy from the reality. He understood that holding on too tightly to the past could hinder his progress. He began to organize his thoughts and emotions, placing them in neat compartments, much like the files in his drawer. Life, he realized, wasn't always black and white. It was a spectrum of experiences, each one adding a unique shade to the canvas of his existence. Sometimes it was about navigating the shades of gray, about finding balance in the midst of chaos. It was about accepting the complexities of the human heart, understanding that love and loss were intertwined. And through it all, he adhered to the moral compass that guided him, finding solace in the knowledge that he was on the right path.